All right, welcome back into a new episode of the Glue Guys. I'm Landon Lucas, and that's my dad, Richard Lucas. And we're back again, this time after 3 games, 3 wins. I believe your prediction of that 6 game stretch that we had, you said 4-2, and that ended up being the correct prediction, right?
Yeah, I mean, I predicted the Kentucky win as well. I mean,
Yeah, you're on a
there's a lot
roll.
of things I predict that's correct. So we can go through all of those if you want.
So what's your predict? Are we winning the national championship? I mean, we might as well get right to it. Can you see into the
No,
future?
listen, no, I don't make any predictions of national championship until I see the path that they need to take to get over
Fair
there.
enough.
So
Fair enough.
I'm not messing with that until those come out. But then I'd be more than happy to go totally in depth with that prediction at that time.
Okay. Well, the 3 games, there was the Oklahoma State game, the Baylor game, and then most recently the TCU game. We
Right.
can kind of just breeze through some of them and, talk about a little bit of what happened. Obviously, in Oklahoma State, that was a little bit of a trap game going into what ended up being a pretty hostile environment down there.
Right.
It's not usually a great crowd, but obviously Kansas coming to town, they showed up big, and that team was on a 5 game win streak going into it, looking
Right.
really good. And Kansas goes in there, handles business. For the most part, everybody, did their job, did well. Grady had an amazing game, which I think is going to be kind of the narrative of most of these games moving forward because he's playing
Right.
out of his mind right now.
Right.
And they handled business, got the dub, which sets up the big game that I want to get into a little bit. The Baylor
Right.
game, game day was there. I flew out to go check out the game myself. It was rocking in Allen Fieldhouse. One of those games that, Allen Fieldhouse has levels. That was one of those ones that got to that next level of, okay,
Right.
it's loud in here,
Right.
especially during that comeback. You know how it is. But let's get into it a little bit. They
Right.
start that Baylor game off and unfortunately come out with absolutely no energy. A couple of the things that I was thinking going into the game was you have to guard because those 3 guards that they have, the one-on-one, something that we talked about was a concern for Kansas. And there's 3 guards that are all really good one-on-one. They find the mismatches, attack it. And early on, they were just letting them get to the basket at will and then letting them get hot from 3 and get their
Right.
confidence going. What were your thoughts about, that slow start in that first half? And did you have confidence in the turnaround in the second half, or were you thinking that this was a lost cause after seeing what happened?
Well, I don't know if I thought it was a lost cause, but it felt like they'd fallen back into that same rhythm that they had done in some of these other games earlier in the year where all of a sudden, before you know it, you look up and they're down 24-14 or something like that.
Mhm.
And so, most of the time you don't count them out when they're at home, right?
Yeah.
I've learned that from you. But so I can't say, oh yeah, for sure they were going to come back. I was a little bit nervous there. What I saw was immediately the things that I was like, oh please don't get into this again, which was transition defense. Next thing you
Mhm.
know, bucket, but layups,
Mhm.
layups, right? And I'm going, what is going on with this team? But then obviously the second half, it was a tale of 2 halves,
Oh
obviously. And
my goodness.
so
Yeah.
also in the second half, they come out and they go bonkers. But so, yeah, I was a little nervous at first, especially because it just felt just so ditto of what they've done
Mhm.
in the past. And they've done
Mhm.
the same mistakes and the same type of situations happening over and over again. But then of course Coach Self takes out this magic wand, figures out what he needs to do, and comes out in the second half and gets
Yeah.
after it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I was sitting there and I thought kind of the same thing. Obviously, early on, all the things that going into the game, you were like, okay, they need to stop transition. They need to play one-on-one defense well. They need to rebound off of the first shot misses. Every
Right.
possible thing that you would emphasize going into the game.
They
Also,
didn't do.
also, the most important thing, they have these 3 guards that I was there for the practice the day before and then shoot around the day of. All emphasis was do not let these 3 guys get hot, go off.
Right.
And where I'm sitting there and I look up at the the screen that has all the points, And I do a little quick math in my head and realize at 40 points, they had all 40 points, those three guys. And then at 45 at
Right.
halftime, they had 42 of the 45 points. So it's like, okay, not only did you not do, some of the emphasis defensively and whatnot, but then the three guys that all the scouting report was focusing on, these three guys, they have all the points. so that was just a terrible start. But I will say, some of those shots that were going in towards they got started off, they were driving, they were attacking the rim well, getting easy buckets, and then they started getting confident. You saw that freshman George just get an unbelievable level of confidence where he was looking over at us and the bench and all kinds of stuff, and he was making and one threes and contested shots. It felt like they got to a point where they just felt as though they couldn't miss, which I think ended up being a little bit to their disadvantage in the second half, because they carry that mentality into the second half, like, oh, I'm just going to make all these tough shots, and kind of got away from the attacking the rim and putting pressure on the rim like they were in the first half. Now, one of the adjustments that Coach Self made at halftime, which I think just shows how great Coach Self is at being aware of the situation. And even though a game plan may, going into the game seem like the best option, obviously in-game situations can switch that. And I was in the offices talking to them before the game, and all signs pointed towards switching five the whole game. I even brought up one time, because they were taking advantage of that KJ switch so much in the first game. Is there a chance you guys don't switch and stuff? And really the answer was no. We're switching this. Like, it's just like, that's just how it's going to work out and stuff. And then obviously, that wasn't working in the first half, and he's willing to scrap everything, all that they've practiced all week, and put DeJuan Harris and Kevin McCullough on their 2 point guards, and hard hedge the rest, trap, put some pressure on George coming off of screens, and it ended up working out really well for them. And that second half, like you said, it was a tale of two halves. They come out in the second half, and it wasn't any, hey, let's chip away at this lead 4 minutes at a time. It was, let's just get the whole lead back. And I think by the second commercial break, we had the lead, and it was a pretty decent lead. So, I mean, that was great to see. And obviously the response, not only from Coach Self, but from the players, where that's tough to make an in-game switch of that magnitude, where you're working all week on one defense, and then in a loud environment where it's always loudest when you're on defense, especially during that comeback in the field house, to have the communication to then switch up and go to a different defense. I thought that was great by Coach Self, and also great by all the players.
Yeah, and it could have actually backfired on him, because you nailed it when you said the fact that when you do such a fundamental shift like that from a defensive standpoint, all it takes is just one guy to just, their brain is still in switch all mode, and somebody's now rolling to the basket for open dunks or open jump shots and things like that. So the level of communication it has to be absolutely through the roof. And so that's credit, like you said, to Coach for pulling the trigger, but credit to those players for executing that. And for realizing, like, hey, we've got to be pointing, we've got to be talking, we've got to be really communicating 10 times more than you normally would, because of the fact that this is going to be something that they haven't actually even done this in a while. They've been in this switch five for most games, most of the season. So, but one of the things I will say is that I do love when, we talk about transition defense, and I've mentioned that a million times, but I can tell you, I absolutely love when Kansas is in rhythm and they put pressure on the defense themselves. I mean, because they can go. And before you know it, they've dropped, 8-10 points on you, and your head is spinning because they have five guys who can go. And we used to talk about KJ and the rebounding and stuff like that. And I know we've harped on that because we're glue guys, we're bigs, and we want that. But really, in the end, some of the times, it's McCullough getting the ball and going.
Yeah.
or somebody getting the ball and going, and KJ's flying down the floor, and they've got all those guys running down the floor. That puts so much pressure on you to try and defend back, and
Yeah.
I also think that takes pressure off of, I don't know if they practice this, at KU, I would assume, but teams that are great in transition, we used to have guys that are automatically not even go for
Yeah.
offensive
Yeah.
rebounds, just back, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like what you're doing is you're almost conceding
Yeah.
the rebound. You're like, hey, fine, if our one big down there can do something, great, but if not,
Get back.
we're gonna get back on defense, because before we know it, KU is gonna blow
Yeah.
the doors off of us. So
That's a
I
good
really was
point.
impressed by that.
That's a good point, because something that we struggle with is when those teams just all crash from all five positions. And like you said, if we're hot in transition like we are, you can't do that anymore. And it seemed
No,
like Baylor, who likes to go after it the way they do, I mean, the second you start running out on them, like the
right,
coach is going to be like, hey, I need two or three of you guys at least to be getting back, if not
right,
four. And so I mean, that's a great point. And I think what makes Kansas so good in transition is just the makeup of this team. I mean, you have a point guard that has great vision. I mean, there was a time against TCU that he was directing traffic and making the
yeah.
pass all inside a
No,
few
no,
seconds. And then you have a guy like Grady, who I know coaches are wanting him to even get better at his movement off the ball, but I think it's pretty good for a freshman. So especially when you get him in transition, he seems to find pretty good open space and stuff. And then KJ, like if he does catch the ball, there's some bigs that if you drop it off to him in transition,
yeah,
like me, you don't want. I stop and I look and I see where the
right,
handoff is and stuff. That's
right,
that's my job, and that's it. But obviously
right,
KJ, he can put the ball down. Kevin is smart with how he moves and works with everybody else. I mean, it just is a perfect storm of guys. And then obviously Jalen, I mean, he's just kind of a do it all. And in transition, once he gets a shoulder past you, it's hard to you cut him off or do anything. And so I think that's a
right,
good point. And really, you saw them get out in that second half, get that transition. DeJuan Harris got going, which was great because of that crazy stat that, if he scores over a certain amount of buckets,
right,
Kansas wins. And, on top of that, you saw some good offensive adjustments going to him. The mid post with Jalen Wilson is something that they went to. Just a lot of adjustments, but then also
right.
just a lot more energy, a lot more movement, a lot of just more from everybody on the team that also got the crowd into it. And once you get Allen Fieldhouse into it, like we know, it just the tides start turning so quickly. And we saw that in that Baylor game. They came away with a win, a much needed win, as
Right.
we were in that tie for first place. We come out of it, and now it's just Texas. And so that was
Right.
huge. Those were the games that you just expect to win at Allen Fieldhouse. Just I,
Well,
you know how Coach Self is, how Kansas and Allen Fieldhouse is, so they got the job done.
yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, when you start talking about the fact that they had almost five guys in double figures, one had nine. When you have balanced scoring like that,
Yeah,
it's just so hard, right?
yeah,
I mean, because when it was the Jalen Wilson show and everybody else wasn't doing
yeah,
anything, you can kind of almost say, hey, we're going to try and do our best to take him out of it and let somebody else try and beat us. But I mean, man, when everybody is scoring, and you were talking about the energy and all of that. What I just don't understand sometimes, and maybe you can speak to this, is Allen Fieldhouse, just the intros alone are some of the best in the country.
yeah,
I get goosebumps every single time I was there, right? And this is just me, old man, up in the stands. So I know you guys are hyped. The crowd is in it and all that. How do you come out as flat as they did against the Baylor? What's causing that?
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, and I've said this before, but you have to Allen Fieldhouse is there and they're ready to go, but you have to get that out of them. You have to use them. They'll come and, try to will you at times and whatnot. You'll hear them, even during a lull stretch, just kind of get up and start, cheering after maybe just a loose ball or something simple to try to, get Kansas back into it. But for the most part, you have to use them. So yeah, you're right. It's loud in there. It's crazy and stuff. But you get to that first TV timeout or something, and you get a long break, and all of a sudden now you're down, and the other team's celebrating, yelling at the crowd. It gets kind of quiet in there, and it got to that point where it's like, and so you have to jump on them right away in those first 4 minutes. And if you don't do that, I think you lose that initial kind of energy from the crowd. You lose that lack of confidence that puts into the other team. That goes out the door if you don't take advantage of those first 4 minutes. And that's why it's so important for those starters to set the tone. But I mean, thing about Allen Fieldhouse that you love is that it can go from 0 to 100 extremely quick. And, we saw that in the second half. And once it gets going in there, obviously it just builds on top of it. But yeah, I mean, you have to come out ready to go. And unfortunately, this Kansas team, for the most part, has had many games where they just don't come out with that energy right from the start. It kind of takes a little something, but at least they've shown the guts to be able to come back. And that was a huge win. As I said, it led them into yet another big game against TCU, which just happened the other night. And something that I think the Big 12 kind of sets up, which is good practice for postseason, is those quick 2-day turnarounds. That Saturday to Monday turnaround against two really good teams in a really important situation where you have to really lock into scouting report to walk through, because you're not practicing. It's just very a lot of intake of information that you take in that 48-hour span, and you have to be locked in and then come out and get your body ready to play. And in a time like March Madness, that's super important, because that's how every weekend you play, you get 1 day off, you play again. So I think that practice like this can be good. And, they showed that ability to play Baylor, take that day off, and then come out against TCU and perform.
Right. And the thing is, too, is there's the X and O portion of it that you have to worry about, where you're supposed to be and all that with that next game. There is the conditioning part of it, where you got to get your body right. You may have had a big, game, physically, and then now you have the, 48 hours, you gotta, do it again. But then there's also the emotional piece to it.
Yeah. Where you got to reset quick.
Big game, right? Win or lose, you're playing TCU on Monday. Win or lose against Baylor. So, and the thing is that emotionally, it could be detrimental regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you think about it, you win a big game, and now ESPN's loving you, everything's great, and and all of a sudden you go in maybe a little flat to TCU, or a situation where you lose a game and then you start questioning things, and then you never know how you respond the next day. So being able to segment that and say, compartmentalize, like, hey, this is the game. It's very coach speak, right? Yeah. It's just, what's the most important game? The next game. That's the most important game of the season, whatever the next game is. And so Baylor's over with. You go celebrate with your boys. Go to the Hawk. The Hawk. And the next day, we got to start focusing on TCU, so that we can go down there and take care of business, which is exactly what they did. And Coach Self is probably pretty good at getting guys ready for that quick turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, as you said, he gives you that night. He always says after the game, hey, go out, enjoy this win, but then tomorrow you got to lock back in. It's time to switch your mindset, worry about TCU, and move on to that. And they did a great job of that. They came out, they played well. Something that I'm starting to see a little bit is, like, as you just said, with the whole Jalen Wilson show that was going on for that losing streak, it seems as though Kansas can kind of work almost. They work better when the whole team is clicking,
Right.
And even if Jalen has an off night, it's better than Jalen going for 40 and the team, as a whole, overall not
Right.
doing great. When everybody's kicking in like they are, and doing their part, it seems like you can take a off night from Jalen or something like that a lot better than if you have all four starters except for Jalen, not doing well. And so
Right.
it was great to see everybody did their part, played their role, and then Grady Dick, who, and we've talked about it to open the show a little bit, but he is he's taking steps in front of our eyes right now, and I could see his confidence growing, and it's going to grow more and more as the postseason comes along, because what postseason really is you get to go play. There's not as
Right.
much of, hey, we got to worry about, putting in this new defense or trying out this new offense we worked on in practice or whatever. By that point, you go out there, what you need to do. Coach Self has put trust into the guys he's putting onto the court, and you just go play. And that's when you see those freshmen or any guys who have stepped into a new role start to really take that next step, because it's like, oh, okay, I felt that my sophomore year, the first time I was getting starts, it was tough at first, and then we start getting into postseason Big 12 play and stuff, and then it's like, okay, well, I'm kind of free now. We're not worried about, oh, I might lose my spot or this or that. That's
Right.
over. Now
Right.
you just go out there, you play, and I could really see him taking advantage of this postseason. And
Right.
obviously, I don't think he's coming back to Kansas, but I think, this is a great
You never
opportunity for
know.
him to move up in the draft. With NIL, I heard what some of those guys were making, and yeah, there could be a case that you don't go to the
Right.
NBA. So you're right. Now it's kind of more up in the air than normal, but man, did
Right.
he look good. The team looked great. DeJuan Harris looked good. Kevin McCullough looked good. KJ did
Right.
his thing. The bench guys are still doing their thing. Ernest has been given his minutes, which it looks like he's now the big.
Right.
That is the backup big, as long as he stays out of foul trouble, which is something that he needs to work on. But as long as he can stay on the court when he's called upon, he seems to be the guy. And I'm okay with that. I like it a lot. It gives a different dynamic to the team, and he's done really well with those minutes.
Well, somebody's probably already done this, but I hadn't heard it before. But can we get a T-shirt or something that says Grady's back again? That's pretty good, right?
What? No, I don't even understand
Grady's
that.
back,
What does
back
that have to do
again.
with? I don't know. I mean, I
I'm
understand
just,
the song, but maybe I'm missing
I'm just
the.
saying. You were talking about how good Grady has been, and
Mhm.
we've seen some games where he has not been that elite
Fair,
for the
yes.
team.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's been a level set. What I mean by that is we saw early on some big time games. We also saw some where we were wondering what's going on and our team scheming and all of that. And it
Mhm.
feels like he's kind of settled in and kind of got his rhythm going. I mean, at one point in the game against TCU, he had like 12 of the 14
Yeah,
points
he
or something
was the whole offense.
ridiculous. Right. So I feel like, you're 100% right about the confidence and the timing of the confidence. The only thing that I would say is that, I love that he's a shooter and he keeps shooting for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if, I mean, it's the weirdest thing because he's got an unbelievable shot, great release, but it feels like he misses a lot. I
I
mean,
don't I don't
you
know
know,
what game you're watching, because
I'm
I
telling
mean,
you, it feels like he's missing a lot. I
yeah.
mean, okay, so let's go through it. He was, so what do you consider to be a decent 3-point shooting percentage?
I mean, decent in my mind, 33%. Good would be like, I don't know. I was never a 3-point shooter, but I would say like 33. I'd be like, okay, that's like you're making 1 out of 3. That's good.
Okay, all right. So he was at 30. He was 3 for 10
Okay.
uh, against
Yeah.
TCU.
From three?
Uh, what's that?
From three, he was?
From three.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'd have to pull up the Baylor one again, but I think he was
About
2 for. Do you have that up?
no.
I think it was maybe 2 for 10 in that one as well. It's not that again, the guy's got an unbelievable stroke. I just feel like um, he was 2 for 9, 2 for 9.
Yeah, so we're teetering on that 30%. I mean, that's not terrible. That's pretty good,
I
especially
guess that's
when you
not
factor in
terrible.
that his scoring, especially recently, that little pump fake mid-range pull-up he's
Oh
developed
yeah,
is nice. His
100%.
ability to get to the rim. I mean, he does a lot of things more than
Right,
he's not just Brennan Green, just go to the corner and shoot.
right,
He has more in his
100%.
game than that. So I mean, I think that yeah, maybe it's not the highest percentage right now from three, but he's making the big ones.
Right.
And he's making buckets in other ways. So I don't buy into that fully yet. But
Yeah, I
but
mean, I guess just overall. I mean, they're shooting. And I can tell you the game against Baylor. Baylor shot 40% from three, and Kansas shot 28% from three.
mm,
So, but in that Baylor game, KU only have 4 turnovers. So you start talking
that's good.
about,
Yeah.
those, because all those misses,
Mm-hmm.
those 3-point misses lead to what, right?
Yeah,
And so
transition.
that's the part that I start going, God, they're missing those threes. They get the ball and they go. So luckily they were able to
Yeah.
counteract that by not having too many turnovers. So
Yeah. No, I could see that. But I still I buy into the fact that he's making his shots and playing well. But I have a question, and
okay,
this is my thought of the day. And it came up when I was just kind of recapping the last three games in my head. And the last game was TCU, where Jalen Wilson struggles throughout the night. I think he only had
right,
2 points in the first half, maybe like five until later, finished with 7 points. Ends up
right.
doing a great job on the rebounds, getting 13, and overall just contributes to the game, finds a way to insert himself, which is what you want from a star player having a bad night.
Right,
But we've now seen two bad nights from him against really good teams where Kansas has been able to pull it out and stuff.
right.
Against TCU and then against Texas, that big Monday game where I think he finished with 2 points and Kansas ended up winning. So here's my question to you.
Okay.
I want to know, is Jalen Wilson the player on Kansas that you could least afford to lose? I think I'm wording that correctly, but like, who is he the one that you don't want to lose the most out of everyone?
Right.
Or is there somebody else that would hurt Kansas if you lost them? If they were to go down with injury or whatever it may be.
So that's a really good question. I think that the the instant instinct, the immediate response was going to be Jalen. Was
Mhm,
that you could least afford to lose him? However, I'm going to actually say Dewan,
mhm,
and I've changed my tune on Dewan because Dewan was not very good there for a stretch.
mhm.
And the reason why I think that he is so valuable to this team is because when he wasn't very good, guess who also wasn't?
Yeah.
KU wasn't very good either
Mhm,
during that stretch when he was really struggling, when he had those 3 games where he had like a total of 7 points or whatever it was. Because he does and impacts the game like a quarterback in football, he is when he's not playing well, it impacts so many pieces of the game.
mhm.
You talked about it earlier when he's going down the floor and he's directed traffic, he's getting the ball up, and he's a scoring threat where defenses have to actually contend for him and make sure that they know where he's at. And also when you start looking at his turnover to assist to turnover ratios,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. He had 0 turnovers in the last game and only won the game before that. I mean, and he's dishing out 8, 9 assists every single game. Those are points. So they may not show up as in the stats under points under his name, but
Mhm.
those led to points because of the ball in his hands. So, man, when he was bad, that's
Yeah.
essentially like him being removed from the game, and
Mhm.
Kansas was a mess.
Yeah.
Kansas was a mess,
Oh.
and so now when he's in the game and you're accounting for all that stuff, and he's scoring and he's throwing, the assist, and he's defending the way he defends. He's one of their best on-ball defenders. When
Mhm.
he's firing on all cylinders, he makes KU better, and that's why
Mhm.
I would vote him to be the most valuable.
Yeah. I am going to agree that I don't think it's Jalen. I think what Jalen brings, one, he's a great scorer, he's a great player in general. But what he brings the most is that star power to the team. That's our superstar, something about
Right,
that.
the stud.
He's the stud, and you have to have one of those guys on the team. So if I were making a case for him, that would be part of it, along with obviously his talent and what he can do, but that would be the main part of it. But when you look at just like impacting the in-game situations and stuff and who you would want to remove or who you couldn't afford to remove, I do agree that it is DeJuan Harris, because I mean, there's that crazy stat that if he scores over 4 points, Kansas is, I think, 22-0 or something crazy. I mean, it's like
I believe
this
it.
year. I mean, and that goes to show that, I mean, when he's a little bit more aggressive, then he's able to open up passing lanes. It opens up more. The offense is better. But I want to present a second guy because you already took who I was going to go with. I think, and you could say Grady and whatnot. I'm going to go with Kevin McCullough for the reason that he's the type of guy that I see a little bit of myself. It's different. We play different positions and
Right.
whatnot, but he is always in the correct positions on defense, and he's always he has such knowledge defensively that if you remove him from that team and you really break down like where the weaknesses are on Kansas defensively,
Right.
I mean, there's quite a few that he fills those gaps and makes up for it. When a guy just gets a shoulder past the initial defender, he's in the right spot. You saw the few plays he was out against Kentucky and they were feeding Oscar Tshiebwe on the post. People were just helping, turning their head, doing the wrong defensive principle stuff. And then he comes back into the game and fixes all that, gets some steals, gets deflections, is in the right place. You know how it is. There's certain stats that are never going to show up on or certain things that are never going to show up on any stat book
100%.
at all that you can do just by putting your body in the correct positions. That should count as some kind of stat. I mean, it'd be hard to track, but it should, when you cut somebody off from coming to the lane. Whereas, everyone else on the team may not get there in time and it's a layup, that should count for something. But that's the kind of stuff he brings to this team. And if you look at Kansas, they've shown that they can win by outscoring teams and whatnot. But it's that, defensive grind game where they've also been shown that they can grind it out and win one of those games. I think if you remove him, you don't win those defensive, hey, we are having an off night. We can't really make much, but we have to figure out a way to win this game. I think if you remove him, it becomes really hard for this team to consistently win those tough games, which is what you're going to need to do in the tournament. And so I agree that DeJuan Harris is a very important part. And I think if you remove him, I would go with you too. That's the person that I would not want to see get injured or something. You end up going to probably Bobby Pettiford as the main point guard, which I don't think that he's a bad player at all. But I just think what DeJuan Harris brings all around defensively and offensively is important for this team. But I would say that another person I would hate to lose would be Kevin, for those reasons. Now, if Kansas is shooting great and transition great and all that, awesome. You don't notice as much if he's not on the court. However, if it's one of those grinded out games, you better hope that he's not in foul trouble or hurt because Kansas, is going to desperately need him in those situations.
You crack me up because did you even notice that you're like a little humble brag? Like, he's really good and he does all these great things.
Hey, by the way, yeah, just in case I had to throw that out there, No, but obviously that I mean more than anything, that's stuff that I used to focus on.
I know.
because that it is important stuff, and that's stuff that I focused on as well, was being in the
Right.
right positions defensively,
No
and
question.
he does a great job at it.
Right. No question about it. And the thing is, too, is the stuff that you talked about in terms of not being in the stat sheet, that's 100% correct. And, coaches notice it, and that's why you play,
Yeah, teammates
right?
notice it.
So,
I mean, yeah, for
the
sure.
casual fan in the stands may not get the fact that you've been able to stop that defender who just blew past somebody and
Mhm.
stop them from entering the lane and getting them turned back around to where they end up taking a really poor shot that ends up leading to a bucket on the other side for KU. They
Mhm.
don't see that. They don't see, what I mean? They
Yeah.
don't account for that piece, even though that was such a vital part to that defensive play. So I hear you when it comes to that, and I agree. I mean, he's from a rebounding standpoint, he's
Yeah.
consistent. Defensively,
Mhm.
he's consistent. He scores on a consistent basis. He might be the most consistent player on the team in terms of you just pretty much know what you're going to get night in and night out. Jalen's had big games and low games. Dewan was non-existent and had some great games.
Kevin's
KJ's
had
been up
some
and down.
Kevin's
You
had
know,
some iffy games offensively, but I
yeah,
think with him, like even so, he is always the other stuff we always talk about it. There's certain things you can control, and
right,
he's one of those guys that the things that he does best are all things he can usually control, and so
right,
that makes it easier for him to have some consistency because he's always going to be able to do those small things, be in the right positions, go after rebounds, guard him, certain things that you don't need your shot falling. But yeah, I would say offensively, there's been a little inconsistency with him too, but he makes up for it because he can be so consistent in other areas.
right. So, what are your thoughts now with the last three games here
Yeah.
as we kind of transition to
I
it? You could hear
yeah.
if two out of the last three are at home, two out of the last three are at home, and those two that are at home are against teams that are not nearly at the levels that Kansas is at, and then they go on the road to Austin to play against the Longhorns. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I would say well, I saw the stat that said Coach Self has never lost any of the final two home games in any of his seasons at Kansas. So that was interesting. So
Oh, okay, that's a good one.
I'm just gonna go with history and say that he wins both of those home games. And it sets up
Right.
a very, very interesting game, possibly against Texas. That could be for the league, depending
For
on how
league,
they handle business against Baylor. And they got some tough games as well. But I just don't see him losing at home, especially with how important these games are. Then you're going to
right.
have the senior night too. Is there even any seniors on this? There's not
Uh,
any that I can think of.
well,
But
will they do something for the guys who are going to be
yeah, sometimes they
like
do.
Jalen and
Yeah. They'll probably do something for them. So yeah, it's last time you probably see Grady, last time you probably see Jalen. So it's gonna be a big
right,
game. But yeah, I don't see them losing those. And then Texas, um, if it's for the league, especially,
right,
Kansas is just they're gonna win.
right. Okay, all right.
But that's my thoughts and predictions. But you're the one that have been right with all your predictions so far. So what do you have for us? Final three games.
So here's what I think. I think that the two at home are going to be no brainers,
Mhm.
and I dare say cakewalks, but I think it's going to be pretty close to that.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, I predict that you're going to see some players come off the bench that don't get them a whole lot of playing
Oh
time.
wow, we haven't seen that for. I mean,
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a while, so I predict that in at least one of the two games. But then I think they drop it in Austin. I think Texas beats them
to win the
at
league.
home. Huh?
So you think it's to win the league, or you
I
just
don't
think?
I don't know. I mean, obviously we don't know what's going on with Baylor, like you said, but
Yeah.
I just whether it's to win the league or not, I think they lose in
All
Texas.
right. Well, we'll see, and
Totally.
we'll go ahead, and I think we may get one more episode in before that Texas game, but if not, we'll be filming right afterwards to give our reactions, and then a little bit of preview to the postseason, the fun part of the season. So when we get
Yeah, I
into
love
the
that.
real stuff, the Big 12
Right.
tournament and then March Madness. So I think there's a lot to play for, obviously, in the coming weeks with with the Big 12, but then you get into, the big stuff. And they're going to really need to continue to win some games, but they could make a case for that number one overall, which is so important because Midwest is, I shouldn't say important because this is going to bring back bad memories, but
Yeah,
it is back in Kansas City.
It doesn't matter.
You do want to be in that environment, I guess. You would think so.
Most of the time, 99% of the time.
Yeah, 99% of the time is good to be back in Kansas City for that. But yeah, right. No, they should be able to make a case for that, and we'll be back to preview all that in our next episode. And thank you for listening. Obviously, if you we had some people in Kansas come up again when I was there the last time, and
really?
They listened. So even though we just have probably a handful of listeners, at least they're consistent and they come and say hi and whatnot. So we appreciate you if you're listening.
Your mom, your grandmother. We've got I even broke out my Dr. Huxtable sweater for this one. So I'm
For those listening on the on
that's right.
Stuff, we have some listeners too. So.
Think of circa 1985.
Before my time. So
Cliff Huxtable is disciplining his kids. So anyway.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. And we will be back again with a new episode next week. See you.
Grady's back. Back again. That's what we need to get on the show, and then I can sing it for him.
Okay. All right. See you guys.